The morning air was crisp, the kind that carries the smell of pine needles and lake water, when I pulled into the gravel drive of my family's cabin. This was supposed to be my quiet weekend retreat, a place where no one could bother me. Except, of course, for the one person who seemed determined to make everyone's life miserable, our HOA Karen. She had already tried to fine me for leaving a canoe on the dock and once even claimed my deck chairs violated community uniformity standards. I thought I'd seen it all until today. As I stepped out with a folder under my arm, the last thing I expected was to hear the crunch of someone else's footsteps behind me. Karen, in her usual oversized sunglasses and clipboard like it was a weapon, marched straight across my driveway without so much as a hello. She didn't knock. She didn't even pause. She shoved open the cabin door and barged in like she owned the place. My jaw dropped. This wasn't just a violation of etiquette, it was breaking and entering. But here's the thing, Karen had no idea who she was about to walk in on. Inside, sitting calmly at the oak table with a mug of coffee, was the State Attorney General himself. He was reviewing a stack of documents with a sharpness in his eyes that could cut glass. He'd agreed to meet me here quietly to discuss the HOA's mounting complaints that had gone from petty to downright illegal. Karen's timing couldn't have been worse. She stormed in, pointing a finger at me like she was about to read me the riot act, but her voice faltered the moment she saw him. Her expression shifted from righteous fury to stunned confusion, like a dog chasing a car and suddenly realizing it caught one. The Attorney General didn't even flinch. He simply set his coffee down, adjusted his glasses and looked directly at her. The silence in that room was electric. Karen stammered something about inspection rights and community regulations, but the words melted under the weight of his steady gaze. For the first time she wasn't in control. And that's when I knew things had finally turned. The Attorney General leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his presence filling the entire room without him raising his voice. Karen tried to recover, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hands. I'm here to enforce HOA code violations, she blurted out, eyes darting between me and him. But the Attorney General only raised an eyebrow, almost amused. He asked calmly, "Do you often enter private residences without permission, Mrs. Reynolds?" Her face went pale, the confidence draining from her like air from a punctured balloon. I watched as she scrambled for justification, flipping through her papers as if a magic clause would leap out and save her. "Well, according to Section 14B, the HOA board reserves the right to," she started, but he cut her off with a single question. "Do you have a warrant?" The question landed like a hammer. Her mouth opened, then closed, but no sound came out. For once, her clipboard wasn't a shield, it was dead weight. The Attorney General stood, his presence towering now. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply laid down the truth. "You're trespassing on private property, Mrs. Reynolds. And beyond that, you're misusing your authority to intimidate homeowners. That ends today." His tone was so sharp that Karen actually took a step back. Her bravado evaporated, replaced with the nervous shuffle of someone realizing they had stepped far beyond their boundaries. I couldn't help but feel a surge of vindication. All those years of absurd fines, of HOA notices that felt more like ransom letters, and now she was standing exposed in front of the one man who could actually hold her accountable. Karen tried to mumble something about acting in the best interest of the community, but her voice cracked under the weight of his stare. And that's when the Attorney General opened the folder between us. Inside were documents that didn't just involve my cabin. They contained complaints from multiple homeowners across the neighborhood, reports of harassment, misuse of funds, and even questionable contracts signed under her watch. Karen froze, her face draining of color as she realized this wasn't just about me. She had walked straight into the lion's den without even knowing it. The Attorney General flipped through the pages slowly, deliberately, each turn of paper echoing louder than Karen's frantic breathing. He read aloud, his voice steady, "Complaint number 47. Intimidation of homeowners for personal gain. Complaint number 63. Unauthorized fines with no board approval. Complaint #92. He paused and looked at her directly. Forgery of board member signatures on community contracts. Karen's hands shook so violently that the clipboard slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the wooden floor. She bent down to grab it, but the sound of his voice froze her mid-motion. "Do you understand these aren't just neighborhood grievances, Mrs. Reynolds? These are potential criminal offenses." Her lips quivered. That's absurd," she sputtered, trying to wave it off. "I've always acted within my authority. People just don't like rules," but the Attorney General's expression hardened. He slid one document across the table toward her. It was a notarized affidavit from a fellow HOA board member, accusing Karen of threatening to ruin their reputation unless they voted her way. The accusation was written in black and white, with signatures and a timestamp. Her face flushed, and I could almost see the gears turning in her head, searching for an escape route. But there wasn't one. The lake cabin, once her stage for intimidation, had become her courtroom. She tried to laugh it off, a brittle, hollow sound. "This is ridiculous. This is just petty neighbors exaggerating." The Attorney General didn't blink. He leaned forward, voice lowering to a tone that carried more weight than a shout. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you want to continue denying everything here and now? Or do you want to explain yourself when the investigation expands into financial records and bank statements?" That's when her eyes darted toward the door. For the first time, Karen looked trapped, like an animal cornered with nowhere to run. Karen straightened her shoulders suddenly, forcing a smile so artificial it looked like it might crack off her face. Her voice shifted from sharp to syrupy, dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh, come on now, we're all neighbors here," she said, stepping closer to the table as if she could charm her way back into control. "I've always been dedicated to this community. Maybe a little firm, yes, but only because I care. Surely we can just smooth this over." The Attorney General didn't move, didn't even blink. His silence shredded her performance far more effectively than any argument. The weight of it pressed down on the room until Karen's grin twitched at the edges. She tried again, leaning on that brittle charm. "Why don't we just forget this little misunderstanding? I'm sure we can work out some kind of arrangement." And that was when he dropped the hammer. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, his voice cool and measured, "while you've been busy rehearsing excuses, my investigators have already subpoenaed your HOA's financial records." He reached into the folder and pulled out a second set of papers. "As we speak, my team is reviewing transactions that don't add up. Payments made to consultants that don't exist. Large sums withdrawn with no receipts. Would you like to guess whose signature authorizes those withdrawals?" Karen's face collapsed. The fake smile vanished, replaced by wide, panicked eyes that darted toward the window, toward the floor, anywhere but the man staring her down. The room grew so quiet I could hear the distant call of a loon out on the lake. For once, Karen, the woman who never stopped talking, never stopped threatening, was speechless. The Attorney General slid the documents back into the folder with deliberate precision. Then he said something that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. "You didn't just walk into this cabin today, Mrs. Reynolds. You walked into the middle of an active investigation." The color drained from Karen's face so fast it looked like she'd seen a ghost. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her breath catching like she'd swallowed air wrong. "An investigation?" she whispered, her voice brittle, as if saying the word out loud might shatter her. The Attorney General didn't answer. He just gathered the papers into a neat stack, tapped them against the table and slid them back into his leather folder. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint groan of the cabin's wooden beams. Karen shifted her weight from foot to foot, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline, but her usual fire had burned out. Then it happened. From outside, faint but growing louder, came the unmistakable crunch of multiple footsteps on gravel. Slow, steady, purposeful. Karen's head snapped toward the door, her eyes wide with panic. The Attorney General calmly adjusted his tie, as if he'd been expecting it all along. Karen's voice cracked as she tried one last, desperate tactic. "Look, this is a mistake. I've been misunderstood. I've given years of service to this community. If there were errors in the books, it's just sloppy paperwork, nothing more. You can't." The sound of car doors shutting cut her off. Multiple. Heavy. The kind of sound that carried weight, authority. Through the thin curtains I could make out the flash of dark suits moving toward the cabin. Karen backed away from the door like it was a firing squad approaching, her confidence unraveling with every step that echoed outside. The Attorney General finally looked up, his voice steady and cold. "Mrs. Reynolds, I suggest you sit down. My team will want to hear your side, before they compare it to the evidence." Karen's knees buckled slightly, but she stayed standing, her eyes darting between the door and the window, as though calculating if she could somehow make a run for it. Karen's breathing quickened, shallow and uneven, like a trapped animal realizing the walls were closing in. She kept glancing at the window, then the door, then back to the Attorney General, who remained perfectly calm, his composure a sharp contrast to her unraveling nerves. The footsteps outside grew closer, now joined by the low murmur of voices, firm, professional, in sync. These weren't neighbors. These were investigators, the kind who showed up only when things were serious. Her voice cracked as she tried to claw back control. You don't understand. The community depends on me. I've kept order, I've sacrificed for that neighborhood. Without me, everything would fall apart. She was pleading now, not commanding, and every word sounded weaker than the last. The Attorney General didn't flinch. He simply checked his watch, then folded his hands on the table. Funny, he said quietly, because according to these records, the only thing falling apart has been the community's trust, while your bank account has been doing just fine. Karen froze, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. It was as though someone had ripped the last thread of her carefully woven story. And then came the sound that sealed it, the sharp knock on the cabin door. Not tentative, not polite. Official. Final. Karen stumbled back a step, her clipboard now hanging limply at her side. Wait, please, I can explain, she blurted, her words tumbling over each other. But the knock came again, harder this time, followed by a firm voice. Attorney General? State Investigations Unit. We're ready. The Attorney General stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He didn't look at Karen. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to crush the last bit of her defiance. He moved toward the door with steady, unhurried steps, while Karen's eyes darted desperately, searching for any possible escape from what was about to happen. Karen's voice shot out in a high-pitched rush, desperation dripping from every syllable. Wait. Just wait a second, she cried, raising her hands as if she could physically stop what was about to come through that door. This isn't what it looks like. Those records, they're misleading. You don't know how hard it is to manage selfish homeowners. Sometimes you have to bend rules for the greater good. Her words bounced off the cabin walls, hollow and frantic. The Attorney General paused mid-step and turned his head just enough to glance at her, his expression unreadable. He didn't argue. He didn't reassure. He let her dig the hole deeper with every excuse spilling from her lips. Karen's eyes shone with a wild glint now. She tried another tactic, her tone swinging to syrupy charm again. Look, you and I, we could work something out, couldn't we? I mean, we're both in positions of authority here. I know things that could be useful. Maybe if we come to an understanding. Her words were cut short by the metallic click of the door handle turning from the outside. Karen's head whipped toward it, her face draining of every ounce of fake confidence she had just tried to muster. Heavy boots shifted on the porch and the muffled voices grew clearer. The Attorney General gave her one last look, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. You've had your say, Mrs. Reynolds. Now it's time to let the law have theirs. The door began to swing open, a shaft of daylight slicing across the cabin floor, illuminating Karen where she stood trembling like she'd been caught under a spotlight. Her grip on the clipboard finally broke, the wooden board slipping from her hand and landing flat on the floor with a dull thud. The door swung wider, hinges creaking, and the sunlight poured in, cutting across the dim cabin like a stage light. Karen's chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths, her knuckles white as she clutched the edge of the table for balance. Her eyes flicked from the doorway to the Attorney General, then back again, like she was trying to will the moment into something else, anything else, besides what it was. Boots thudded against the wooden floor as two investigators stepped inside, dark suits crisp, badges flashing at their belts. Their faces carried the kind of stone-cold focus that told me they weren't here for a friendly chat. Karen's whole body stiffened, her shoulders rigid, her lips twitching as if the words she wanted to say couldn't quite make it past her throat. One of the investigators gave a quick nod to the Attorney General before scanning the room. His eyes landed on Karen, and he didn't need an introduction to know exactly who she was. The silence stretched unbearably, thick with tension, until Karen finally broke it with a shaky laugh that didn't sound human at all. This is overkill, don't you think? I mean, I'm just a volunteer board president. Surely we don't need this kind of show. The Attorney General didn't answer. He simply gestured toward her with a subtle motion, as if passing an unspoken command. The second investigator stepped forward, pulling a folder from under his arm. Mrs. Reynolds, he said firmly, we'll need you to answer some questions regarding financial irregularities and reports of misconduct. This won't take place here. You'll be coming with us. Karen's knees buckled, and for a moment I thought she might collapse completely. She gripped the back of a chair, her eyes wide and glistening, darting around the room like a trapped bird searching for an open window. Karen's silence lasted only a heartbeat before it shattered. Her voice erupted, high and jagged, bouncing off the cabin walls like breaking glass. This is insane. You can't just drag me out of here like some criminal, she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the Attorney General. He's behind this. He's twisting everything. I was protecting the community. The first investigator didn't flinch. His tone stayed steady, controlled. Mrs. Reynolds, no one is dragging anyone. But you are required to cooperate. If you refuse, we have the authority to escalate. The way he said it, calm but final, only made Karen's panic sharper. She slammed her hand against the table, rattling the coffee cups. Cooperate? With lies? With slander? Do you even know who I am? I've run that neighborhood for 12 years. 12? Without me it would fall apart into chaos. And this is how I'm treated. Her voice cracked halfway through, the bravado already splintering. The Attorney General didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at her, his words cutting through her fury like a blade through cloth. Mrs. Reynolds, this isn't about who you think you are. It's about what you've done. Her breath hitched, her lips trembling as she tried to summon more outrage, but the words wouldn't come. The clipboard lay forgotten at her feet, the symbol of her authority reduced to nothing more than a piece of wood and metal. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing tighter, the investigators standing like immovable sentinels between her and any thought of escape. The second investigator opened his folder, flipping to a page with quiet precision. He began to read. Documented complaints from 34 homeowners. Unauthorized collection of fines. Intimidation through fraudulent violation notices. Misuse of HOA funds totaling. He stopped, looked up at her, and let the number hang heavy in the air. 6 figures, Mrs. Reynolds. The words landed like a physical blow. Karen staggered back a step, clutching her chest as if the number itself had pierced her. Karen's voice cracked into a shrill pitch, raw and desperate. 6 figures? That's impossible. You don't understand how much it costs to keep that neighborhood afloat. Landscaping, maintenance, legal fees, do you think any of it pays for itself? Her hands flailed in the air, fingers twitching like she was trying to grab hold of a defense that wasn't there. The first investigator didn't blink. He slid a photo across the table, the glossy image catching the sunlight from the door. Karen froze when she saw it, her signature, bold and unmistakable, on a check made out to a so-called consultant company. The problem was obvious. The company didn't exist. Her mouth worked soundlessly before a hoarse whisper escaped. That's taken out of context. The Attorney General's voice cut through her excuse, low and unwavering. Context doesn't erase a forged signature. Karen's chest heaved, her entire body trembling now. She looked around the cabin wildly, at the walls, the window, the floor, as if she could somehow find a hole to crawl through. Then her eyes landed back on me, burning with a strange, almost pleading intensity. You know me. Tell them. Tell them I'm not some thief. I was protecting everyone, keeping order when no one else would. You've seen how those people treat me. Her desperation was palpable, her words tumbling faster and faster, unraveling like a rope fraying under pressure. But the investigators didn't look at me. They didn't need my confirmation. The evidence spoke louder than any defense she could muster. Then came the second blow. The investigator flipped to another page and read aloud, multiple witnesses reported threats of retaliation for noncompliance with HOA directives, including threatening to foreclose on homes without due process. Karen's knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her voice a broken mix of rage and fear. Lies. All lies. Those homeowners, those ungrateful parasites, they twisted everything. I only did what was necessary to keep control. Her words hung heavy, exposing more truth than she realized. The investigators didn't even raise their voices. Their calmness was the sharpest weapon in the room, slicing right through Karen's frantic outbursts. The first one closed his folder slowly, almost deliberately, and said, Mrs. Reynolds, every single one of these statements is backed by testimony and records. You can call them liars if you want, but paperwork doesn't lie. Karen shook her head violently, her hair whipping around as tears pooled at the corners of her eyes. You don't get it, she snapped, her tone swinging from fury to desperation in seconds. Do you think anyone else would have the guts to keep that neighborhood in line? They hated me because I made them follow the rules. Rules matter. Without me, they'd all let their lawns rot, their houses fall apart. It would ruin property values, destroy everything we built. Her chest was heaving now, each word drenched in a twisted mix of self-justification and panic. But the Attorney General only tilted his head slightly, his voice calm and razor-sharp. So you admit your actions were about control, not service. The words hit her like a punch. She staggered back, clutching her clipboard again like it could shield her from the truth pressing down on her. No, you're twisting it. I did what I had to do. I kept the place alive. The second investigator leaned against the table, his tone steady. Alive? Or profitable? Because according to these bank statements, the only person who benefited from your leadership was you. Karen's breathing turned ragged, her body trembling so violently she could barely keep her footing. She opened her mouth to scream another denial, but what came out instead was a choked sob that caught in her throat. For the first time, the iron facade she wore like armor cracked wide open, and the room filled with the raw sound of her unraveling. The Attorney General didn't rush. He let Karen's sob echo through the cabin, the sound almost too human for someone who had spent years wielding authority like a weapon. Then, without a word, he slid the folder back toward himself and flipped it open again. The air in the room seemed to tighten with every deliberate movement of his hands. Karen sniffled, her voice cracking as she tried to steady herself. I've already told you, this is being blown out of proportion. People exaggerate. They lie. I never stole anything, I managed things differently. Her words came out thin, hollow, like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. The Attorney General tapped one page with his finger, his eyes never leaving her. And how do you explain this? He pulled out a printed email exchange, her name right at the top, her words threatening a homeowner with foreclosure unless they paid a special assessment fee that wasn't authorized by any board vote. Karen's face blanched, her lips parting in disbelief as though she couldn't recognize her own words staring back at her in black and white. That's taken out of context, she whispered, the same tired excuse she'd leaned on before. But the investigator beside him didn't give her room to breathe. He laid another document on the table, this one stamped with a state seal. Bank subpoenas confirmed those fees were deposited directly into an account under your name, not the HOA's. The silence after that statement was suffocating. Karen's eyes widened, her hands trembling so hard the clipboard slipped again and clattered onto the floor a second time. She didn't even try to pick it up this time. Her voice broke into a near scream. That money was temporary. I was going to put it back. You don't understand, I had debts, things you wouldn't understand. Her confession hung in the air, raw and damning. The Attorney General leaned forward, his tone low but cutting like steel. Mrs. Reynolds, you've just admitted to embezzlement. Karen gasped, stumbling back as though the word itself had struck her. Karen's eyes darted wildly, the whites showing stark against her flushed face. Her breathing came in short, frantic bursts as she threw her hands up like she could push the accusation out of the air. No, you don't get it, she shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing. Just until I could fix things. The HOA doesn't understand the pressure I was under. I held everything together while those ingrates complained about paint colors and lawn height. The first investigator took a slow step forward, his expression unmoved, professional. Borrowing implies permission, Mrs. Reynolds? Did the board approve these transfers? Karen froze, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. The silence answered for her. The Attorney General closed the folder with a soft thump, the sound final like the slamming of a gavel. He leaned forward, his voice sharp and unwavering. This wasn't about pressure. This was about power. And power misused becomes corruption. Karen's knees buckled, and she half collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching at the armrest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Tears streaked down her cheeks now, streaking through her foundation, leaving her face raw and streaked. Please, she whispered, her voice a desperate rasp. I can make it right. I'll pay it back. Every cent. Just, don't ruin me. I can't. The second investigator cut in, his tone colder than the first. It's not about paying it back. It's about accountability. Dozens of families suffered under your intimidation. You don't get to buy your way out of that. Karen shook her head violently, rocking slightly in her chair like a cornered child. Her words spilled out in a jumble. You don't understand what it's like. They hated me, they were always against me, I had no choice. I did what I had to do. The Attorney General straightened, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Everyone has a choice, Mrs. Reynolds. You chose wrong. Karen's head snapped up at the metallic sound, the unmistakable click of handcuffs being drawn from a leather pouch. The air in the cabin thickened instantly, pressing down on her as though the walls themselves were closing in. Her chair scraped against the wooden floor as she shot to her feet, panic igniting in her eyes. No. Wait, please, she cried, her voice cracking so loudly it echoed off the rafters. Her hands shot out in front of her, palms trembling as though she could physically hold off what was coming. You don't have to do this. I can fix it, I swear. I'll resign from the HOA, effective immediately. I'll step away, disappear, whatever you want. Just, please don't put those on me. The first investigator remained calm, the cuffs gleaming cold in his hands. Mrs. Reynolds, this isn't about resigning. This is about the law. Your actions have consequences. Her whole body shook as she took a frantic step back, almost tripping over her own clipboard on the floor. She pressed herself against the wall, her voice rising into a high, unsteady shriek. Consequences? Do you have any idea what this will do to me? My reputation, my standing, my life, it'll be destroyed. I built that neighborhood. I kept it alive when no one else could. The Attorney General's gaze never wavered. His words were calm, but they cut straight through her panic. You didn't build that community, Mrs. Reynolds. You strangled it. And today that ends. Karen's knees buckled, and she slid halfway down the wall, clutching at the wood like it could anchor her. Her tears flowed freely now, no longer the dramatic kind meant to sway or manipulate. These were raw, ugly sobs of someone watching the last fragments of their control shatter in front of them. The second investigator moved closer, his voice firm but not unkind. It's time to stand up, Mrs. Reynolds. Don't make this harder than it already is. Karen's lips trembled as she looked between the cuffs, the investigators, and the Attorney General, her mind racing for a way out, even as every escape route vanished before her eyes. Karen's breathing turned ragged, each inhale sharp and shallow like she was drowning on dry land. Her eyes darted wildly, first to the cuffs, then to the door, then to the window, calculating, desperate. Her fingers twitched against the wall as if she might bolt, but her legs trembled so violently she could barely keep herself upright. She raised a shaking hand, pointing at the Attorney General with a sudden burst of venom, her voice breaking under the strain. You set me up. This is personal, isn't it? You don't care about the community. You just want to make an example out of me. Her words ricocheted around the cabin, shrill and panicked, but there was no power behind them anymore, only fear. The Attorney General didn't even rise to her accusation. He stood like a stone pillar, his voice steady as bedrock. You set yourself up, Mrs. Reynolds. All I did was shine a light on what you've been hiding. Karen's face contorted, rage and terror colliding in a twisted mask. She slammed her fist weakly against the wall, leaving only a dull thud. No, I'm not some criminal. I'm not going down for this, I won't. The first investigator stepped forward, the cuffs catching the sunlight in a cold flash as he extended his hand. Mrs. Reynolds, stand. Now. Her knees buckled and she sagged against the wall, sliding down until she was crouched on the floor. Her mascara streaked down her face, her sobs raw and uncontrolled. For a fleeting second, it looked as though she might comply, but then, suddenly, her body jolted forward in a frantic lunge toward the door, a desperate gamble for freedom. And just like that, the lake cabin, once my quiet escape, had become the place where the truth finally caught up to Karen. All her shouting, all her threats, all her power plays ended the moment the law walked through that door. For years she believed no one could touch her. But in the end, the very arrogance that fueled her control brought her downfall. So the next time someone like Karen barges into your life, convinced they're untouchable, remember this. The louder they scream, the harder they fall when the truth finally closes in. Because no matter how high they climb, justice has a way of knocking louder. And sometimes, it shows up when they least expect it, like at a lake cabin with the Attorney General waiting inside.